Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you all to Andrew Rabbit from Incuto. Andrew, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Listen, great to have you on the show, and we've had a good chat beforehand and finding out about an area I think is fascinating. And I think one of the key things of what we've been talking about is financial inclusion has been an aspect we've spoken about before on the show, and there's been some good solutions and some good tech that's driving real advantage to people in very disadvantaged scenarios at various different stages. Incuto to me looks like a company who are, and massive congratulations to this, who've been nominated and voted onto the most influential fintech list of 2021 in the Financial Technologies magazine. So lovely to have you in that listing. But there's always reasons behind that. There's always reasons for every single company to be on that list, and it will generally be driven by adding real benefit to businesses and solving real problems. And that to me seems exactly at the core of what your business is all about. So rather than have me give you the sort of rambling intro to everything we're talking about, Andrew, if you take the reins and talk a little bit about your background and then Incuto itself and what you guys do.
Thank you. And firstly, I'm delighted to have been shortlisted, so thank you very much. So I'm Andrew Rabbit. I'm the CEO of Incuto and co-founder. My background is quite varied. I started life working in a charity in Leeds and worked through that into accidentally becoming a management consultant for lots of years, which I'm fully recovered from, but very much focused around data and business intelligence and reporting analytics. The kind of stuff that doesn't get you invited to parties. And we came across working with a particular sector in the credit union and community banking sector in about 2015, where we were working with a number of organizations who were just looking at their business holistically and trying to work out why they were sort of slowly, in a very dinosaur and glacier-like way, going out of business, and trying to help to piece that back together. And what we recognized was there's a massive gap in technology. So Incuto was born out of that concept that actually what we need to do is to be able to emulate for a community bank or credit union who are really small in the UK market, but massive in the US and Ireland and Australia. We had to be able to deliver to these guys a technology platform that would allow them to compete with people like payday lenders. So they could be really fast, they could be slick, they could be marketing savvy, and to be able to do that at a price point that they could actually afford to engage with because they don't have huge budgets for IT. So that was a problem we were trying to fix. We're doing quite well at that so far. We've got 30 credit unions on board using the platform, another sort of 27 or so coming through the process of being onboarded. So it's about 25% of the market. So we're having a pretty good success so far. So it's
and that's extraordinary, isn't it? When you think of a business that's 5-6 years old, and particularly with, or 5 years old, particularly with the time that you've been through over that, not just including the pandemic over the last year to 18 months or so, but also including Brexit beforehand and everything that was we sometimes sort of dust that off to recognize that just how much uncertainty there was in the marketplace. But on top of that, and I think this is really interesting to me, as soon as and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but when you talk about payday loans and payday lending and all those sort of things, the connotations are generally not positive around that sort of area. And the companies which have prospered significantly over the last decade in that sort of area probably haven't showered themselves in glory as a philanthropic and charitable organization in terms of how they can deal with that, and certainly not known for their pure innovation that's for good at that sort of stage. I'm really interested, and when you talk there as well about how big the credit unions and your community banks are in the States, about how this sort of comes over and some of the things that we're able to do here that sort of and this is something very much after my own heart, about moving and changing perceptions of an industry, because it's something that we're doing, trying to do every single day in our industry as well. But I'm really interested to hear how you've managed that and how you're becoming the sort of antidote to what's been seen sometimes in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So one of the things, I think our business exists on kind of four key pillars effectively. The first one is that kind of software as a service type approach to the customer journey, effectively, to be able to plug in over the top an experience that was very much like a payday lender. The word you were probably trying to think of a minute ago is ethics. It's that thing where they don't shower themselves in glory, but they were amazing at marketing, but they didn't mind who they marketed to or the risks that they took. And it's a really interesting thing, because in the final days of Wonga, before Wonga went out of business, if you ever look at their company accounts, they spent probably 5 or 6 times more on marketing than they did on searching people's credit history and AML checks and ID verification, right?
Wow.
So they were heavily focused on that. And the notable ones, like Wonga, you always remember the kind of weird puppets on the screen sponsoring Channel 5 programs. And the other ones are people like Sunny, who had a bear rubbing its backside against a caravan to distract away from the APR. If you just sort of look it up, you can see this great shot of a bear, next to a caravan and a guy stroking its head. And there's an APR right down at the bottom that says 1,291%. All right, and it's brilliant. It's really clever. But the problem is they're really good at marketing, but they can market their brand. And the organizations we're dealing with tend to be much more community focused. So they don't have that kind of national TV presence. They have a thing where, as a sector, people have kind of heard of them. People know that they're there, but they've got a very negative perception. So they're seen as a kind of poor person's bank. Is where you go if you don't need to anything else. And yet, actually, 2 things are true. One is, if you go overseas, if you go to the US, 54% of the population have a credit union account. It's more than would have a high street bank account. In Ireland, it's 75% of the population. It's like a rite of passage. The second thing is, in terms of the services, they offer loans and savings. And actually, in the majority of cases, they're paying far more back in dividend than the high street banks are paying in interest. Yeah. So it's a really interesting market that nobody's ever heard of in the UK. That what we're trying to do is start with that, standardize the experience so that it's somewhere you can go and know that you're going to get a great customer experience, and then automate it and speed it up and reduce the cost of it. And then you can start to drive more business into it. So if you did that national marketing campaign, you could do it so that when people landed, they would get a very consistent set of services rather than somebody getting to a website and somebody getting to a paper form. But there's work to be done before that becomes kind of embedded.
I think this is a really interesting area to look at, isn't it? Because when you put things like that together and you hear about the sort of the prominence of it in the States, and even in even closer to home, probably even more relevant and closer to home in Ireland, is this something that can help speed that up to elevate its adoption in the UK? Is that something you think is going to be happening over in England in particular, or and is this you mentioned before we were talking and that went live, we're also talking about this being a global phenomenon, right? And a global opportunity. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, look, it's really interesting. So as a business, not only do we believe it can be like that, we've actually bet on it, right? So the business model that we've adopted is that you give away the technology. You let people adopt the technology for nothing. And we charge for transactions. And the reason why that's really important is because we aggregate a volume of transactions with our suppliers. And they're the people that they were going to be paying anyway, in most cases, or potentially relationships they had no way of getting because it just required too much volume. So we've got relationships with people like TransUnion and Experian and Clearbank that on that level, somebody could go to and negotiate a contract, but on a much lower volume than we're able to do. And then you've got other relationships like the Post Office and MasterCard and people like that, where just on an individual basis, it's just not worth doing. But also the technology that they're connecting into just isn't enabled to do that. The legacy technology is still sat on a box under the desk. Yeah. So we've built this ecosystem of suppliers and we charge a margin on those transactions, but it actually works out lower cost than if they'd have gone directly, if they were even able to do that. So the way we've transformed that is then to sort of look at that as being an additional set of services that they weren't able to deliver before, or the same service is just cheaper. And it's really important that, so we absolutely believe in the growth of the market, because literally our entire business is hinged on it, but it also puts us in absolute alignment with the market. So we are successful when they are. So we work really hard to deliver the services as the tech. And it's interesting because we keep getting described as a fintech, but actually we don't do the fin bit. So they do, and we're the tech bit. So we've become a really neat partnership where between us, we're forming a group of national fintechs.
Yeah, which is extraordinarily exciting, because I talk about this all the time, that the collaboration seems to be at the core of fintech at the moment. And that can be through from capital markets through to to everything, retail and payments and all areas in between. That we're seeing this sort of great growth of collaborative technology, probably because of tech itself, which has been a huge enabler over this sort of time. And this time has been really interesting for me. And one of my great privileges over the last year has been speaking to so many companies who've been able to not just survive through this sort of period, but almost grow. Speaking to people all last week who've grown, whose figures have been reported as being upwards of over 100% up year on year. Your headcount, if we look at that, this time last year more or less was 18. You're now 30 people spread all the way from all corners of the UK, which is another aspect of it. And I think sometimes companies can be a little bit embarrassed about that, because no one wants to be seen crowing at a time where it's been so difficult for everyone. But at the same time, I think it's been, and one of my sort of quests has been to throw as much light as we can on companies who've really done that, because when people are doing that sort of growth, it means they're doing something valuable and helpful and good, and to take a negative and turn it into a positive, to me, is one of the great things that people can be doing at the moment, and sort of bullhorning and sharing those sort of stories far and wide. So let's look at that. Let's have a look at Incuto itself, and sort of see that journey from 18 to 30. Talk to me about some of the areas that have allowed the business to grow, and some of the things that you've done through such a difficult period that you can look back and say, we've got that right, and this has helped us, and we've managed to to navigate that story, because it's not difficult to double in size, full stop. There's a whole load of new challenges, there's a whole load of new things. It's definitely not easy to do it when half those people you won't have met, and it's even harder to do it when some of them are spread across all areas of the UK. And I know that you're thinking there, right, do we go back in and buy new desks when we go back into the office? But give me a little sense of, and give all of us a little sense of that journey, and sort of the last 12, 18 months, and how that negative's been turned into a positive for Incuto.
So I think anyone who pretends that they were prepared for the last year is talking nonsense, right? And certainly that's true of all the organizations that we were working with. There was an agenda to transform and become more digital. But a lot of the organizations we work with up to that point were very heavily dominated around the idea that you walked into a branch, you saw a person, or you spoke to somebody on the phone. But like I referenced earlier, the technology that's based around is stuff that's installed on a server under the desk. And so when you look at that kind of that collective of challenges for those organizations, I think what that's allowed us to do, we were talking about the idea of business continuity. And I remember back in March last year, just for sheer amusement, pulling out a presentation where business continuity and working from home was bullet point number 9 on a list of features that the platform could benefit, how the platform could benefit organizations. And overnight, it became bullet point number 1. It became the only thing that anybody wanted to talk about. How do we now continue business without doing this? And so I think what we've been building towards, and I think this is real power of the fintech revolution that we're part of, what we've been building towards was so much in advance of what the market needed, but kind of building up to that point. So what we did was take a really logical journey up to this stage. We went and worked with a group of organizations who were willing to collaborate, willing to share, and I mean actually the end customer organizations. And we took them on a journey with us. We started saying happy birthday to people. We sent them an email, and it was just using data behind the scenes, pulled from the systems, being able to really cleverly manipulate and drive marketing traffic. So you start saying happy birthday, you remind people that their loan's nearly repaid with like another one, and you start to do that kind of slow build up. And then what happens is,
was this very much a legacy from your management consulting career beforehand?
yeah, because one of the challenges, when we first came into this was a group of organizations just wanting reports. Tell us whose birthday it is next month and we'll write them a card, right? Because the legacy systems just didn't allow you the access to that kind of data. And so it's like that natural urge to go, that's ludicrous. I'm not just going to send you a report of whose birthday it is. Let's just send them an email. It's as easy to just send them something. Why would you not want to do that? And of course, it very quickly escalates to, okay, well, if I'm sending them an email, now they've got to have somewhere to land because now they're phoning up. And what we see in terms of traffic is that sort of just under 40% of the traffic for withdrawals, loan applications, balance inquiries takes place out of office hours. And that was exactly the experience from that very first hit of marketing, where suddenly people are phoning up and you go, well, that's no good. They've got to have somewhere to go. So we've organically built this platform out to kind of continually meet the challenges. And then you hit that tipping point where you go, the next bit we're going to do, you don't need yet. So the fact that we can do a faster payment by hitting a button, that's not something that's in your sphere of interest right now. And the fact that we're going to sign up to the banking framework with a post office so that your members can walk into a branch, you don't really get the point of that yet. And then one day, just out of sheer luck, one day it became the top of their agenda. And I don't mean luck in a bad way, like it was a good thing, but it was interesting timing in that we were able to very quickly deliver that, super quickly deliver that. And it was almost, it would be an absolute lie to say it was by design, but it was obvious that as part of that digital transformation journey, that would be a thing they would want at some point. So our role in that technology partnership bit is to always be a step ahead of them. We weren't quite so geared up to the idea that we would need to do that quite so quickly. So a lot of the focus of our growth has been around the customer teams, deployment teams, actually working out how to actually deliver our product into a group of organizations who we used to walk into the office and sit down next to.
Yeah,
which has been the biggest challenge for us, I think.
Which is and it's absolutely essential to that growth, isn't it? Because if you look at it and you're saying, right, okay, something shooting up the list in terms of importance that quickly, it's so easy to get that wrong. It's so easy to and this is what I was talking about, going from, we're not talking about 500 to 2,500 here, but 18 to 30 is a difficult journey because it's been so personal. When you're in that 18, it's your DNA as a founder, I'm almost certain, that sort of spreads all the way through that, and your ability to sort of pass that message and bring people into the genuine DNA of the business and what that's and have people who are exactly on that same customer journey is very, I won't say easy at 18 because it's got loads of different challenges, hasn't it, in those startup years, but to spread that out and to get it right requires real graft. And I think when you're looking at that sort of the best analogy I've heard in however long we've been in this this year that we've had, the sort of petrol on the bonfire of digital transformation is the best way I can visualize it.
Absolutely.
Full stop. And I think it's companies like yours who've been agile enough to recognize the advantage in that, to provide a service then that is robust enough to then be, I think there's loads of companies who've scaled who haven't had that robust infrastructure to be able to manage that, to then provide the service that is necessary for the customer to then be happy. Because one of the things I think that's been particularly relevant at the moment is that every consumer's expectations have risen with the digital enhancement, and you see it from every aspect of your day-to-day life in terms of how you turn on your TV, to your phone, to whatever, or get in your car. Everything is as easy as it possibly can be, and that user experience is so key. So I imagine that's put a huge challenge on you, a great challenge for you to wrestle with, to make sure that great reputation that you were building over the first sort of 4 or 5 years of the company is maintained through that growth phase, where it's not just an opportunity that presents itself to you, but it's how do you really capitalize on that opportunity to make sure it's that not only can you double in size over this year when the market and the moon's aligned to give you that opportunity, but how then does it continue to do that to make sure that the next phase of the business is even more successful? I'm really interested in your take on that as well.
Yeah, it's really funny, isn't it, that you're absolutely right. It is in the DNA of the business. And we have been a business that from the very start has set out to behave differently to other people in the market.
Yeah.
And people are in fear of legacy system providers. They concern themselves with what they're going to do to them next, how much money they're going to charge them for something, all that kind of horrible stuff that they get that happens to them along the way. Right.
Yeah.
And we set out with a simple thing of just don't be that, right? Just be anything but that. Ask what people want, help them along. And we have this simple thing in our world that if somebody comes along with a great idea, we say thank you for it. We don't quote them on it, right? We don't send them a bill for building it. We go, what a brilliant idea. I can't believe we didn't think of that, because that's kind of the whole way that our business will grow. And bringing people in who have that mindset and indoctrinating them into that way of working can be really challenging depending on the environment that they've come from. And I think one of the real kind of gifts that we've had along the way is that because we've all been able to sit in a room with each other and been able to meet the customer. And that's, when I say the customer, one of the really, really crucial bits here is that it's the person you're helping at the end. There's a real personal connection to the problem with this, right? That if you build a system that's meant to send an email at 9 a.m. and it just doesn't go, that's just irritating, right? And you think, well, that's a support ticket that's coming in. That's a real problem. We've got to fix that. And somebody will shout at us. If you've got a system where when somebody hits withdraw and the money doesn't go, that's the difference between somebody being able to feed their family that day or not.
Yeah.
Plus an entirely different sort of focus on the tech stack that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
And that connection to that problem is best built with a team of people who really get that. So when you're bringing new people in, it's often very difficult to kind of feed that down. But one of the benefits of it is the fact that it's such an endemic problem that people have heard of it, people have experienced it. So you get people in. We've had people who've come in to the business who've applied for a payday loan. They know the sheer nightmare of having to go through that process, worrying about whether they're going to get it, all that kind of stuff. So they've experienced that drain. And so when they're fixing it, they know they've got the code, the keys to that code in their hand that can actually make that experience better for someone else. It's a hugely empowering thing. So we've got a lot of people who are working in the business who are really excited and engaged in fixing that problem. And as a business, we give them the freedom to do that as much as possible, to kind of go, look, this is the thing we're trying to fix, crack on. And it's the same, trying to get people into the business who align with that can be challenging, but we've been really lucky so far. And I think luck definitely plays its part. But moving forward in terms of scale, I think one of the things that we know is that the scale of the business will be international. We've got a UK market which is absolutely primed to grow.
Yeah,
payday lenders have gone out of business. Banks are rejecting more and more people. There are significantly higher numbers of people suffering financial crisis in the UK. We incuto are not a business that is fixing that problem. We're helping the organizations who do to be more efficient and be able to deliver that in a more sustainable way. But that problem isn't in the UK. That problem is global. And so naturally, there is a lean towards, okay, so how do you fix that somewhere else? So I think one of the really exciting bits of our business next is not only going to be how do you grow the team in the UK, but how do you get a team in the US? How do you get a team in Ireland? And start to see the business grow around that, which is a whole new set of challenges.
So what's your journey towards that? Because when you start to hear that sort of scale, you're looking at sort of Series A, Series B, to an extent Series C, sort of funding routes and all that sort of thing. Is that on the roadmap for you guys now?
It is, yeah. So we're going to be going out for a Series A later this year.
Fantastic.
Mainly to grow that part of the business. We already, like I said earlier, we already have sort of incoming sort of inquiries about that, and we've been very cautious not to push that too fast, so that we can absolutely, sort of deliver to this UK market and make sure that we do that really well. And this is our foundation for the whole platform. Very, very exciting.
And there's so much I could touch on in terms of what you've just said. I'm just trying to sort of ponder exactly where to start, because I think what you've just intimated there is something which I'm sort of very fixated on, which is purpose-led business, right? And when you're looking back at that sort of growth and sort of growing 25% of the market share, fantastic. That growth from 18 to 30, I think you answered that brilliantly around, you know, how you deal with it, because you are dealing with something which is, and to me, this is the fascinating part of tech. Tech is at the moment solving problems that people can get really truly attached to and excited into. And when we look at some of the main motivators for people in joining a business, in growing their businesses, it comes back time and time again as to what we actually doing, how we doing, you know, fintech for good, how are we doing fintech here that's or tech that's really moving the needle and solving real world problems. And for you to be able to do that, I think is undoubtedly one of the key reasons why it's not just been an exciting year for you, but as you said, I think it's just touching the surface, isn't it, about what you can and as a business grow and achieve.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? That one of the things that we set out to do, because you're right, purpose is crucial. One of the things that I set out to do, and I accidentally put it on a slide deck on a pitch one day, on the very last page, and I said, Incuto is a socially profitable business. We're not a charity, we're not a social enterprise, we are a profit-making sort of business in the making, but we aren't here to do that at the expense of being purpose-led. We're here to do that in order to deliver a kind of balanced model of, you can create a profitable business who's set out with a social purpose. It's not, let's create a profitable business and then also tack on that there's some social good stuff that we could do. And it feels like a lot of fintech has been driven down that road. I know there's certainly a big sort of push on the idea that fintech can solve financial exclusion. I don't believe that's true at all. I think fintech can be an enabler. To give you a sense of that, actually, in numbers, right? A payday lender could return £260 in interest on a £260 loan, right? To give you a sense of it, right? A credit union, by law, is capped at being able to return just over £18 on that loan, right? Now, the problem with that is that the cost of delivery of that loan is so high for a community bank or a credit union that giving that loan is an act of charity. It's not a sustainable product. So one of the things that we set out to do was to make that product work. So if that's the average amount of money that people borrow from a payday lender, it's £260 over 3 months. A payday lender could mercilessly exploit that. How do we make that product sustainable when you can only return 18 quid? And so the maximum you can pay through our platform to deliver that product, the maximum is £6.
Wow.
Right? So we've made a customer journey with automated decisions, with payments, with full suite of ID checks, AML checks, ID verification, credit scoring, open banking, all of that in a customer journey, including an e-signature, and the money out the other side. And Wonga's big claim was that they could do that in 20 minutes. And it's possible to do that on our side from start to finish, of somebody starting to enter their data into the form through to the end in less than 5.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
And we've delivered that to a community bank who doesn't have an IT budget.
Well, this kind of, I mean, that, bravo first and foremost. But it comes back again, doesn't it? To if I'm to look at, and this will be what I'm doing this week as we prepare the magazine for release on the 29th of March, is to summarize, the sort of what's the golden thread that stitches so many of these companies that have really accelerated over the course of the last year and are set to do great things again this year. Friction reduction is something without question that I'll be talking about. The ability there to really make it as easy as possible for everyone to use your product and to deal with how it is to engage with you as a business. Second piece is about solving real-time problems that have got a genuine issue in the marketplace. Always, to me, being one of the core things. This is the 4th, 5th year we've done this this report now, and it comes back every single time within it. And now more than ever, I think if you're looking at a third tenement of it is cost reduction. And this comes down to efficiency. And how can you make a process more efficient and more costly? Reduce that cost and make it more attractive for people to engage with it. And with you guys, doing that with a strong and sustainable market to grow into, with genuine need and genuine opportunities for disruption, I would be very surprised if people aren't queuing up around the corner for that Series A, and I'll be watching it with watching it with very keen eyes to deal with it. So we've touched on that. Let's finish with the future. You mentioned there about Series A fueling growth into Irish and American markets. Massively exciting, and I can absolutely see the potential of what you're doing there. What else should we be looking forward to in the incuto roadmap at the moment?
Well, that's a really good question. So, so we're just completing the launch of our entire back office platform, the thing that replaces all the legacy systems altogether, and that's our kind of next step. So in early summer, we'll be sort of launching that to the first customers, and it's really interesting because that's our kind of gateway into being able to go and really challenge the overseas markets. And what we see now is the ability to be able to start to really disrupt some stuff around autonomous finance, bring in artificial intelligence into the decisioning engines, start to look at the way that people are using technology on their phones and driving decision making around how money's moving together, but also to bring these organizations into the ecosystem. So if you go to an organization right now and want to apply for a product and they've got open banking, a credit union isn't there as a feed of data in. So rather than taking data out of that ecosystem, put it back into it, being able to connect back in. So there's a whole bunch of that stuff that we're doing in the next 12 months. I think the really interesting bit from our perspective is looking at how we start to use blockchain to start to reduce some of the cross-border transactions. Really interested in that. Starting to look at a more frictionless way of being able to do cross FX transactions between organizations. So a great example of that being you've got some extremely wealthy credit unions in the US and the UK, and you've got some quite large scale organizations that are in, for example, Africa, who don't have huge balance sheets. So they want to do loans to farmers, they want to do loans to local businesses, but they're kind of micro loans, and how you reduce the cost and friction of that transaction enough to make it possible to also be a sustainable product. But that a credit union with a significant balance sheet in the US could be cross-border transacting with that credit union in Africa to support that ecosystem. So looking at all that kind of stuff. And the really exciting bit for me is that as we move into more mature markets like the US, we then come full circle and bring all those products back and put them into the UK market when it's ready.
Exactly.
So it's going to be great.
It does sound like you've got yourself a year worked out, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. That's assuming we're not allowed out of our living rooms in that time, of course.
Well, you never know what's going to happen next with all of this, do you? But it's hopefully we're creeping up. I've come back up to the office for one day only today, so seeing what it's like in a deserted city of London is quite interesting right now.
Scary, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Andrew, listen, I loved hearing about this. Hopefully everyone who's been listening in has also done exactly the same. For people who want to find out a little bit more about you and the business and everything you spoke about, which I'm sure there's going to be plenty with some of the things that you've really marched into there, what is the best way of them contacting you?
Really simply, email address is hello@incuto.com. You can look us up on the web. If you email that, you will get to me. So if anybody wants to hear any more, I'm more than happy to tell people what we're up to, and if they want to keep in touch, I'm more than happy to do that.
Fantastic. Andrew, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so pleased that it's been going as well as it has done for you, and even more excited about what comes next. It's been a joy to have you on the show. Thank you for being so generous with your time and sharing all that information. And I think there's a lot there that anyone in any business can take out of what you've been looking at and achieved, and that sort of strategic direction you've set yourself in, based around one of my favorite things in the world, which is being nice and doing the right thing. So it's never a bad place to start, is it?
Absolutely. Really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show. Thank you all for watching as well, and we'll see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.